The call came just after 3. I was finishing a logo revision when my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. I nearly let it ring out until a calm male voice said, "Is this Ilara Vance? I'm calling from St. Luke's Episcopal. We have your daughter here." My throat closed. "Junie?" I asked, already standing. "She's safe. A couple dropped her off a short while ago. They said you were dealing with a family emergency." My stomach turned. Junie was supposed to be at kindergarten, not in the care of strangers at a church. I didn't ask any more questions. I just grabbed my keys and ran. The drive blurred. I barely remembered traffic lights or the way my knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. My only focus was getting to her. When I finally pulled up in front of the church, I couldn't breathe properly. A woman guided me through the narthex to a quiet side room, and there she was. My little girl, sitting on a bench that seemed too big for her, her legs dangling, clutching a foam cup of cocoa with both hands. When she saw me, her face lit up, then folded. She jumped down and ran straight into my arms. "Mommy!" I dropped to the floor and held her as tightly as I could. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" My voice came out in pieces. She shook her head but whispered, "They said, you didn't want me anymore." My chest cracked. 2 days ago, my father had said it so casually over the phone. "You chose money over family. Don't be surprised when family stops choosing you." I thought it was emotional blackmail. I didn't think they'd go this far. I cradled her face. "I want you more than anything, Junie. You didn't do anything wrong. Okay?" "Nothing." She nodded against me, her grip not loosening. The priest approached and handed me a folded note. No signature. Just 6 words until she learns what matters most. I didn't cry. I carried my daughter out to the car. Her head rested on my shoulder like it had when she was a baby. She didn't let go, and neither did I. By the time I clicked her seatbelt into place, one thing was crystal clear. This wasn't just a sick message, it was war. Growing up in the Vance household meant learning early where you stood and where you didn't. I was the oldest, the reliable one, the fixer. Lacey, on the other hand, was the light. The girl with big eyes, big dreams, and a magnetic way of making you believe in her even when she'd done nothing to earn it. When she failed biology in 9th grade, my mother said, "She's creative, not academic." When I got into Stanford on scholarship, my father asked if I had a fallback plan. Every win I earned was expected. Every loss of hers was softened, blamed on the world, not understanding her vision. Her vision changed with the seasons. At 22, she wanted to open a vegan cafe. By 25, it was a boutique perfume line. None of them made it past the 1-year mark. But Doreen and Carl always showed up, wallets open, disappointment carefully reserved only for me. 3 months ago, she invited me to lunch at a place that looked more like a spa brochure than a restaurant. She ordered champagne before I sat down. "I've got something big this time." "Elle," she said, eyes shining. "A luxury skincare lounge. High-end facials, botanical therapy, CBD-infused masks. It's going to blow up. I just need $30,000 to secure the lease." I laughed. I actually laughed. "Lacey, are you serious? That's your 3rd one in 6 years. Her smile faded. "This one's different. I'm working with an influencer. She's got 1 million followers." "No." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "I'm not doing this again. I have a child to raise, a business to run." She stared at me like I'd spat in her drink. "You've changed," she said coldly. "You used to care about family." That same night, my father called. No hello, just "I hear you're withholding help again." It wasn't a request. It was a warning. One I didn't take seriously until they took Junie. 2 weeks after that lunch, Lacey showed up at my house with a folder of Frappuccino and the smug certainty of someone who thought no was a soft maybe. "I figured showing you the numbers would help," she said, sliding the folder across my kitchen counter like we were in a boardroom. Junie was napping upstairs. I didn't want a scene. The folder was filled with mock-ups, social media projections, a floor plan sketch. She had already picked out eucalyptus-scented towels. "Lacey," I said gently, "this looks nice, but I'm not in a position to invest." Her jaw tightened. "It's not an investment, it's a loan. I'll pay you back in 6 months tops." "I'm a single mom," I said quietly. "Not a bank." Her smile vanished. She stood smoothing out her blazer like she hadn't just thrown her dignity on my counter. It's always about your daughter, your grief, your struggle. You act like you're the only one who's ever had it hard. I act like someone who's still standing after having everything ripped away. That's not selfish. That's survival." She left without saying goodbye. The next morning, I got a text from my mom. "You know how hard your sister is trying. Maybe show a little compassion." Then a call from my dad. "If your mother gets sick from this stress that's on you." 3 days later, radio silence. No good mornings. No weekend check-ins. No Junie looked so cute in her Easter dress texts. Just an empty inbox and an eerie kind of quiet that made me check my phone more than I should have. I thought that silence was the punishment, that they'd cut me off to make a point. I was wrong. The silence wasn't the punishment, it was the setup. It was raining hard that Thursday. I remember because I had left Junie's yellow rain boots in the car by mistake, and I'd been kicking myself for it all morning. I was deep into a rebranding project when the school number flashed on my phone. I answered immediately. "Hi, Ms. Vance," the secretary said. "Just confirming, did someone new get added to Junie's pickup list?" My stomach dropped. "No, I said already standing. Why, she was signed out about 30 minutes ago." The system flagged the pickup as approved, but I didn't recognize the names. They had the family authorization code from her file. I didn't wait to hear the rest. I grabbed my keys and ran. The drive to the school was a blur of honking horns and wild, scattered thoughts. At the front office, the secretary explained that an older couple my parents obviously had claimed there was a family emergency. She'd recognized them from previous pickups and didn't question it. I called their phones, straight to voicemail. I tried the landline. Nothing. Lacey, too. No one picked up. The house was empty. The neighbors hadn't seen them. By 5, I was calling hospitals. By 6, I was pacing with the phone in my hand, trying not to throw it. And then the call came. A quiet, steady voice. "Is this Ilara Vance? I'm Father Rourke at St. Luke's Episcopal. I believe your daughter's here with us." 15 minutes later, I burst through the church doors, soaked and breathless. Junie was sitting on a bench in the lobby holding a plastic cup of cocoa, her cheeks blotchy from crying. She ran to me the second she saw me. I dropped to my knees and held her like I'd never let go. "Are you hurt?" I whispered. She shook her head. They said, "You needed to learn what matters." The priest approached quietly and handed me a folded note. 6 words written in my mother's handwriting. "You'll understand when you choose family again." I stared at the paper, my hand trembling. Junie clutched my coat and wouldn't let go. The rage didn't come right away. First came the stillness, then the certainty. They'd crossed a line I couldn't let them step back over. Officer Monroe didn't sugarcoat it. "This isn't just a bad judgment call," she said, flipping through her notepad. "It's child endangerment, Ms. Vance. Plain and simple." I sat across from her at the station, Junie curled up beside me with a stuffed bunny someone from the front desk had handed her. My voice felt thin, like it belonged to someone else. I told the officer everything, how my parents had taken Junie without my knowledge, how they used outdated authorization codes to bypass the school's safeguards, how they'd left her at a church with nothing but a change of clothes and a note. When I stopped talking, Officer Monroe simply said, "Let's get the report filed." That night, I barely slept. Junie refused to leave my side, and I couldn't bring myself to move either. The following morning, a social worker from Child Protective Services arrived to assess our situation. She was kind but firm. I understood. They had to check everything now because someone had failed my daughter. By the end of the week, Rowan had moved into our guest room. He brought groceries, changed light bulbs I didn't realize had gone out, and handled school pickup while I met with a lawyer. Janelle Ruiz came highly recommended, and from the first moment we sat down, I knew why. She didn't flinch at the words family and police report being in the same sentence. "You're not overreacting," she said after reading the incident file. "You're protecting your child. The law is on your side." Still, I felt the weight of it. Filing charges against your own parents isn't something you prepare for. But they hadn't just crossed a boundary, they'd dismantled one. And I was done rebuilding things for them. After the police report was filed, everything slowed down, but never really stopped. Junie still clung to me at night. Rowan kept the house running while I handled meetings and interviews. Janelle warned me the process could take months, so I filled the waiting with purpose. I began documenting everything: texts, voicemails, screenshots, dates. Every scrap of interaction with my parents or Lacey I saved. One evening, while organizing paperwork for Janelle, I opened the fireproof box that held Robert's estate documents. It had been years since I touched them. I thought everything had already been handled, but in a manila folder near the back I found a property deed I didn't recognize. It was a small plot of land, nothing big, just a lakeside parcel Robert's grandmother had left for Junie in her will. It wasn't worth a fortune, but it had sentimental value, and it was supposed to be hers. Except, it wasn't anymore. The deed had been transferred out of Junie's name 6 months ago. Sold. Signed by Carl and Doreen as trustees of her inheritance. I stared at the signatures, not breathing, as the realization hit. They sold it. They took something that belonged to my daughter and liquidated it without ever telling me. I dug deeper and found the transaction details. The buyer's name was Vague Sum Holding Company, but the transfer memo referenced a payment wired directly to a business account under Lacey's name. They used Junie's inheritance to fund her skincare lounge. I sat on the floor surrounded by documents, shaking from the inside out. They hadn't just crossed legal lines. They had violated something sacred. They'd taken from a child who had already lost her father, and now they wanted to teach me a lesson. I put the papers back in order, added them to the case file, and sent Janelle an email before the adrenaline wore off. The courtroom felt colder than I expected. Not physically, just in the way every sound echoed and every glance held weight. Janelle sat beside me, calm and composed, while I clutched the folder that had become the quiet record of my family's betrayal. Carl and Doreen sat across the aisle with their attorney, stiff and expressionless. My mother wore a gray suit too big at the shoulders. My father didn't look at me at all. When the judge called our case, I stood. My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. Janelle began with the abandonment report, how Junie had been taken from school without my knowledge, delivered to a church, and left there with nothing but a note. She passed the paper to the judge, who read it silently, lips pressed into a hard line. Then came the documents. The property deed, the sale confirmation, the payment transfer memo, all of it laid out with precise, painful clarity. I watched as the judge flipped through the papers, pausing when she reached the line that named Junie as the original beneficiary of the land. I'd like to note Janelle said that the funds from that sale were funneled into a failed business venture run by the respondent's younger daughter, Lacey Vance. My mother's attorney stood. Your Honor, my clients acted in good faith. They were trying to provide for the family as a whole. Their actions were rooted in concern for their granddaughter's emotional stability, given Ms. Vance's. The judge held up a hand. She turned back to me. Ms. Vance, do you have anything you'd like to say? I looked at my parents. They didn't protect Junie from instability. They caused it. They stole from her, abandoned her, and tried to spin it as love. This wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. The judge didn't respond right away. She simply nodded once, then looked down at the file in front of her. I find sufficient grounds for the immediate suspension of contact between the respondents and the minor child. Further visitation will require family counseling and court review. No one moved. The silence that followed wasn't tense. It was hollow. The order came through 2 days after the hearing. Full custody protection, no contact from Carl or Doreen, unless approved by the court and preceded by mandatory therapy. The paper felt lighter than it should have. It didn't undo what they did, but it gave me room to breathe. Janelle called it a clean win. I called it survival. Lacey never showed. She hadn't returned a single message from anyone since the hearing notice. Rowan said he heard from someone at his office that she was spotted boarding a bus headed east with 2 oversized duffels and a new hair color. I didn't care where she went. I just hoped she didn't leave a trail of broken people behind her again. Junie started sleeping through the night again. The nightmares came less often, and when they did, she no longer screamed. She would just crawl into bed next to me and whisper, "I'm okay now," as if convincing herself. But one night, as I tucked her in, she looked up at me and asked softly, "Do Grandma and Grandpa still love me?" The question hit like a bruise forming under the skin, slow and deep. I knelt beside her bed and brushed her hair back. "I think they don't know how to love the right way," I said. "But that doesn't mean you did anything wrong." She nodded, her lips pressed together like she was afraid her feelings might spill out if she moved too much. "I love you the right way," I added, holding her hand. "The kind that keeps you safe." That seemed to settle something in her because she turned over and hugged her stuffed rabbit tight, breathing slow and even. After she fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the stack of unopened mail. Rowan had gone back to his place the week before, promising to be on call for anything. I believed him. The house was quiet, but it wasn't empty anymore. I could feel something returning, something steady, something honest. But the past wasn't finished with us yet. I didn't expect to see him again, not that soon. But there he was, Carl Vance, standing on my front porch with his shoulders slumped and a worn duffel bag in his hand. It had been 3 weeks since the court order. I almost didn't open the door. "Elara," he said, voice lower than I'd ever heard it. "We lost the house. Your mother's staying with Susan." He didn't look like the man who used to bark orders across the dinner table or lecture me about respect. He looked smaller somehow, as if the weight of everything had finally settled into his bones. "I just need a place to crash for a few nights, until I figure things out." I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "I didn't want Junie to hear any of this. After everything you did," I said, keeping my voice, "even you show up here. I made mistakes," he muttered. "We thought we were helping Lacey, helping the family. You left my daughter at a church," I said, sharper now. "And you want me to open my door like nothing happened?" His face tightened. "We didn't think you'd go this far." The door creaked open behind me. Junie peeked out her eyes wide. When she saw him, she shrank back and whispered, "I don't want him in our house." That was it. That was the line I'd never let anyone cross. I turned to her and nodded gently. "It's okay, sweetie. Go back inside. I'll be right there." Then I faced him again. "You need to leave. Now." His jaw flexed like he wanted to argue, but something in my face must have stopped him. He stepped back slowly, then turned and walked down the steps. I watched until he disappeared around the corner. When I came back inside, Junie was already curled on the couch, clutching her stuffed rabbit. I sat beside her and pulled a blanket over us both. She didn't ask what he wanted. She didn't have to. I knew what she needed from me, and this time I gave it without hesitation. By spring, we were somewhere new. The apartment wasn't big, but it was bright and quiet, just 2 blocks from Junie's school. She loved walking there each morning, her little backpack bouncing with each step. I loved seeing her laugh again, real, unguarded joy. We had dinner with Rowan and his husband every Sunday. They brought board games, I brought dessert, and Junie called them her favorite uncles. No one talked about courtrooms or grandparents or what we'd left behind. Just stories and second helpings and soft good nights. I unpacked slowly. I wanted this place to feel earned. One evening, Junie asked if we could decorate her wall with something special. Together, we painted a small wooden sign. She picked the words. I helped her trace the letters. "Real family shows up." It hung above her bed, crooked but perfect. That night, she curled into me after I read her favorite story, the one about the brave girl and the quiet lion. Her breathing slowed, her hand resting against my side, warm and trusting. I stared at the sign above us, the brushstrokes uneven but clear. Everything we'd lost, we were rebuilding, not from what used to be, but from what we chose.